Chinese foreign ministry officials are urging the United States to have the right understanding of their country and to bring bilateral relations back on track. Now, they made those remarks in response to US President Joe Biden's comments about US-China ties at the G7 summit.
我们敦促美方端正对华认知，停止干涉中国内政，停止损害中国的主权、安全和发展利益，同中方相向而行，以实际行动推动中美关系重回正轨。
Mr. Biden said yesterday that he believed a shift in US-China ties could occur soon. He added that he expected a thaw in frosty relations with Beijing, quote, shortly. Now, that's as G7 nations issued a communique at the summit that singled out the country on issues including Taiwan, nuclear arms and economic coercion. The group also agreed to diversify their supply chains to not be dependent on one country such as China. Now, Beijing has firmly opposed the statement by the G7 leaders. It summoned Japan's ambassador to China in a pointed protest to the summit host. Now, Beijing also berating Britain, calling it to stop slandering China. For more, let's cross over to Lo Minmin. She is in Shanghai. Minmin, some very strong rhetoric coming out of Beijing on this G7 meeting. What's it been like?
Well, China's foreign ministry issued a scorching statement within hours of that G7 communique coming out this weekend. And the state-linked media, Global Times, even called the G7 meeting an anti-China workshop. Now, Beijing has hit back nearly point by point at every issue taken up by the G7. For instance, when it comes to the South and East China Sea's territorial dispute, China says that it's always been a defender of international maritime rule of law and that other relevant countries should not be provoking confrontation. When it comes to human rights, China says that these are its internal affairs. Other countries should not be criticizing China when it comes to Hong Kong, Xinjiang or Tibet, and instead they should reflect on their own history of human rights abuses in their respective countries. And when it comes to Taiwan, China says that the One China principle is the stabilizing principle. The fact that G7 nations had not explicitly opposed Taiwan independence forces shows that they are condoning these forces, and that would have implications for peace. And finally, when it comes to economic coercion, China says that it is the US that is engaging in such acts of unilateral sanctions and decoupling from China, and this all goes to show the double standards being applied here.
And Minmin, there was also reaction from China's foreign ministry for US President Joe Biden's comments about the two countries' relationship. What specifically did the ministry say? And was there a sense of a refute or a pushback, perhaps, against Mr. Biden's belief that relations between these two, it's going to thaw, according to the president?
Well, it's hard to see how Beijing would see eye to eye with President Biden on that, given the context of what was said, because President Biden said that he expects a thaw in relations after what he describes as a silly balloon incident. And that is very far from how China sees the incident. They were greatly angered by how the US has escalated the spy balloon incident. That's not going to be easily forgotten. And it's clear from today's Foreign Ministry press briefing, the spokesperson, in a moment of sarcasm, asked what is the significance and sincerity of such communications, given the US is insisting on imposing sanctions on Chinese officials and companies. She urged the US to lift these sanctions to create a favorable condition for dialogue to happen and for the US to stop curtailing China's rise and its developmental interests. And pointedly, she also said she did not have any answer to a question about whether President Joe Biden and Xi Jinping will be speaking over the phone anytime soon. Clearly, China doesn't seem that eager to run into the arms of the US without first extracting some concession from them.
Minmin, thank you for that. Lo Minmin, they're reporting for us from Shanghai.